Our next presenter is Dr. Elaine Leader. I mean, she's got the name Leader, and it's awesome. So she's the Dean Emerita of the School of Social Sciences. She's from Lynn, Massachusetts. She went to 4 very prestigious universities. She got her BA in Soc from Northeastern, MSW from Yeshiva University. She got her MPH from Berkeley and her PhD from Cornell. When she's not teaching, she speaks about topics on the Holocaust, and she also enjoys swimming, biking, and canoeing. A round of applause for Dr. Elaine Leader.
So I know some of you. Would you put your hand up if you've been in my classes? Oh, a lot of you. Well, good. So we can chat. I like to just kind of talk. I'm not going to have a PowerPoint. Can you hear me? The mic is on? All right, I think it's working now. Okay, so this is the second time I've spoken to a leadership class, I think, and I was asked to do so not because my name is Leader, because it's spelled differently, L-E-E, but because when I started, about your age, I started to move into leadership positions. In fact, it started a lot earlier. It started in elementary school. And it's kind of interesting because you taught the chapter for the book that you're supposed to read for today. I don't know if you did, but I did. And it was about the relational model of leadership. And I think that is the bottom line of how I became a leader, L-E-A-D-E-R, although I feel like I fit the shoes of a leader, L-E-E and L-E-A. My name was not Leader, by the way. It used to be Elaine Schneerson. Nobody knew how to spell it. It was really a tough name. And then when I got married, I kept the name. When I got the divorce, my husband said, I want my name back. And I said, no way. And I kept Elaine Leader, because I feel like an Elaine Leader. So when I was a little kid, I was chubby, have been chubby my whole life, and had a really rotten self-image. I didn't feel likable, I didn't feel lovable, I didn't feel attractive, but I was very good with people. I could form relationships early and well, and so I did. And so by the time I was in elementary school, I started to work in the elementary school office, and I find it rather amusing that I started in elementary school working for the principal, and then at SSU I became the principal because I was the dean of the School of Social Sciences. How many of you are in the School of Social Sciences? Anthropology, sociology, psychology, geography, political science, all of those. Put your hands up. Do you know what school you're in? Some people don't. Social sciences is really about human interaction. And if you're in the sciences, of course, you'll be studying more of the biology and the chemistry. But in social sciences, we really look at how do people interact with each other. And so it was very clear from early on that I was a social scientist and learned how to relate to people by elementary school. By high school, I was in drama. I really loved to speak publicly, which is kind of funny for somebody who didn't like herself very much. But when I put on a role, when I had a job to do, like to act, I could change my persona, and I could become whoever it was that I was supposed to be in those roles. Then later in my life, by the way, I went to college and graduate school, did not say one word in one class for 7 years. 5 years of college, because it was a 5-year college, 2 years of graduate school. Didn't say a word because I thought I was dumb. And I said nothing. But along the way, I started to get decent grades, not great grades, okay grades, and I was likable. And so what I learned in all of this is, and this is one of the leadership tips I give everybody, fake it till you make it. That's how I live my life. When I became dean, what the hell did I know about budgets? What the hell did I know about mounting classes for all of you and mounting a schedule? I didn't know anything. But I had really good help who knew what they were doing, and so they taught me. So what I urge you to do is, don't say, I can't do this because I've never done it before. Do it once and do it again and again, and you get good at it. Just fake it till you make it. It's a tip that I was given early in my life, and I found that it really did work. Then I became a therapist, and that was easier because I could listen to people, and then I could give advice or help them figure out what it was that they needed to do. But I began to run groups, and it was in that position, particularly, that my leadership abilities started to shine. My bosses saw that I was a leader among leaders, and that I could talk to a colleague about inappropriate behavior without having them get defensive, that I could run supervision sessions with peers, and we could help each other. And so I was offered more and more leadership positions, and I remember at one point saying, no, not me. I can't be the supervisor. I don't know anything. Fake it till you make it. I did it. Then I went to Cornell to get my PhD, and let me tell you, if you think you're dumb, walk into an Ivy League university where all the professors have written dozens of books. I remember the first time I had a meeting with my advisor. Listen to this, the worst moment of one's life. He had sent me home to read a book, G.D.H. Cole, The History of Thought. And I read it, I loved it, learned a lot, sat in his, at Cornell when the sun comes out, which is very rare in upstate New York, you sit in the garden. So I sat in the garden with him, and he said, so what did you learn from G.D.H. Cole? And I went blank. I didn't take notes. I hadn't known what the book was. I knew what the book was about, but I didn't have anything in front of me to trigger my thought. And here I was with this prize-winning historian. And there is a lesson that I learned for leadership. Make notes. I mean, simple tips, simple tips. Remember what you want to cover. Remember what you want to say. Today, you know, I could give this talk in my sleep, but I have 3 pages of notes because I don't want to be left there hanging like that day I was at Dick Kohlenberg's garden and didn't have a thing to say even though I had read the book. Has that ever happened to you? Yeah? Isn't it embarrassing? You're humiliated. You know you got a brain. You know you got something to say, and you know it goes blank. So fake it till you make it. Make notes and be prepared. Don't walk in cold. You know, I used to think, oh, I can wing it. You know, walk into a class, I can wing it. Well, without notes, without preparation, you can't wing it. You can get by on personality for a little while, but then people are going to see you got no content. And, you know, it's kind of like candidates. You ask them a deeper question, and if they don't have an answer, it means they haven't prepared. You need to be sure that you know your stuff. Now, you'll be learning it along the way, of course, but have some information behind you. So that's what happened when I was getting my PhD. Then I got to SSU. Oh, well, what happened was, again, I was a faculty member at Ithaca College, which is in upstate New York. Very cold place. And in fact, it snowed yesterday. I was sorry to see my friends. We're out here. I'm going to the pool after this to swim laps, and they're digging out snowstorms. So I used to want to get the hell out of there because the weather was so bad. And I had gone to Berkeley for a master's in public health. By the way, my father and my mother always told me I was dumb, so I got a bachelor's, 2 masters, and a PhD to prove that I wasn't. Yeah, right. Thank you. And the reason was I was a girl. What could a girl do, right? That's what they told me. What could a girl do? Well, I showed them what a girl could do. And eventually they ended up being proud, but it took quite a while. And that only came after I had a kid. And by the time I had a kid and a PhD, then I was okay. And I was married too, so I covered all the bases to be a good girl. But by the time I got to Ithaca College and was working as a professor, I got elected as a leader on the faculty, on the Board of Trustees. Only one faculty member on the Board of Trustees. Now, talk about being a fish out of water. There I was, somebody like you, like school, studies, you know, reads, does okay in school, teaches, had a good life. Then I get in there with the heavy hitters, and there was somebody who was the CEO of Price Waterhouse, which is an accounting firm. Another one was a physician who ran some hospital in Philadelphia. I mean, we're talking about heavy hitters. We ate lobster every day that we met. I mean, I was hanging out with the president of the university. I was hanging out with the provost of the university. And I kept thinking, excuse my language, I don't know shit. What am I doing here? I was like a fish out of water. Once again, I faked it till I made it. And I was told that I was an outstanding faculty leader because I spoke up. And that's another thing. And I want to say this definitely to the guys, but to the women particularly. Speak up. Use your voice. And don't end your sentences with a question. Right? That is disempowering. You don't have to be tentative. If you know something, say it. Now, guys, too, are self-conscious and feel uncomfortable, but somehow their socialization often is, okay, speak up. For young women, and I was one of them, I didn't say a word for 7 years of graduate school and college. So speak up. Have something to say, but to speak up. And that's why I was good as a faculty trustee, because I knew it from being in the classroom. And they were at the top making decisions about budget and about finance, and they didn't know that we didn't have chalk in the classroom. They didn't know that the whiteboards were cracking. They didn't know that we needed more classes. And I could say all of that because it was my experience. So I spoke from my experience. Then, because I'd had this cumulative leadership experience, I applied for one job out of Ithaca. Remember, I wanted to get out of the snow. And I applied for one job, and it was as dean of social sciences here, because I wanted to come back to California. And I got it. And it's a very funny story, because I never believed in California woo-woo stuff, you know, like dream it and it will happen. I always thought that was kind of too airy-fairy for me. But what happened was, I came to a family event in Palo Alto, and I said to my sister-in-law, I can't get a job in California. I've been looking for years. I've been looking for 25 years. And she said, oh, let's go out and visualize. So we went out on the deck, and my daughter and my cousins and family went out. I think there were 6 of us. And we visualized Elaine getting a job in California. I went back to a snowy Ithaca, and there on the machine was a call to come for the interview at SSU. And I thought, whoa, this magic works, right? You visualize it and it will come. I've been doing that lately for a husband and it hasn't come. But, you know, maybe if all of you visualize, maybe I'll find a husband too. But at least I found a job in California, and I was very grateful to do so. And I got here, and again, as I said earlier, I didn't know shit. I mean, I didn't know budgeting. I didn't know scheduling. I didn't know human relations work. But you know, your book talks about knowing, being, and doing. And the first tip that I really have to give you is, or the third tip that I have to give you is, surround yourself with really smart people and leave them alone. Don't mess with them. They know what they're doing. That's why you hire them. Maybe they need to learn the ropes for this little bit of business that's going on, but you know, if they're smart, they'll be quick studies and they'll get it. So when I got here, there was a budget manager who, and she was a trip, you know, like I was kind of this hippie and I was kind of like lefty, and she was from the military. Yes, ma'am, she would say to me, yes, ma'am. And I thought, this is not going to work. I mean, we are so very different. She was brilliant, brilliant. And she saved my skin so many times because she knew her stuff. And finally, we ended up getting along remarkably well, so that whenever I go to where she now lives, I visit with her, because I had surrounded myself with smart people and I left them alone. Now, sometimes you surround yourself with people who you think are smart and they blow it. And then you gotta get tough. And that was a little hard for me because I'm used to that relational model, which was knowing, being, doing. So you know yourself, you be yourself, and then you do it. But then I found that there were people who didn't do what they were supposed to do, and then you have to be a hard ass. And so what I suggest to you, so kind of as a fourth tip, after you surround yourself with smart people and leave them alone, is if somebody doesn't do their job, confront it early on and set them on a path for correction. Because if you don't start early, it could go on and become a pattern that you can't deal with. And let me just tell you a story. We had a couple of faculty members in the School of Social Sciences who have since retired, who never kept their office hours, right? We would show up, the students would show up, they were posted on the wall, and they never showed up. Well, the first time I confronted the faculty member, and he said, "Oh, I was there, I came late." Well, okay, so I thought, all right. Third time, I said the same thing. Fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, "Oh, I'm coming. I used to call him at home. Where are you?" And he never showed up. And I had not documented it. I hadn't put it in his file. I hadn't written it down. I was doing the relational model. Let's be nice to this guy and he'll come along. Bullshit. He was not going to come along. He had a cushy job. He knew for years he didn't have to show up. He wasn't going to show up for me. And in fact, it's quite funny. He looked at me one day and he goes, "I know who you are." What the hell did that mean? I looked at him. I didn't know what he was talking about. I said, "I know who you are." I didn't know who he was, but, I wasn't going to be pushed down by him. There were other situations like that. There was a case in which there was a sexual harassment case. And I confronted the person, and we had a go-around. And fortunately, in this case, I did document it. And then we went to HR, the Human Relations Department, where there is an affirmative action officer. And it was reported, and he was removed from his position. So you document, you keep records, you hold people to the task, not meanly. I mean, yesterday, a colleague of mine just retired in ENSP, Environmental Studies, and he wrote me a note and said, "I want to thank you for being so humane during difficult times. You were a role model for me about how you can be a decent person as things around you are falling apart." So, you can go to a person and say, "Hey, look, you screwed up, but, let's fix this. How can we fix it? What can you do?" Then I did this with a woman who needed to get tenure. And for professors here, you have to write because that's part of our job. You write books, you write articles, and she wasn't writing. She wasn't going to get tenure because she wasn't writing. So I got her on a plan where she would come in once a month, believe it or not, show me what she had written, and then send it out to the reviewers. And by the time she came up for tenure, she had a couple of articles under her belt. So hold people to task. Don't be wishy-washy. And that's a hard one because you want to be nice. You want your people to like you. You want people to fall into line because they're good people. Well, I'm afraid sometimes people don't. So what I really suggest is know yourself and know others. Engage yourself in learning new informations, and then as you develop the competency, you learn what you can and you cannot do. So an example, as I was learning my competencies, I could read a budget, I could understand a budget, but I couldn't do all the heavy calculations on the Excel spreadsheets. For that, I had my budget manager, and she would bring me a printout, and I would see which department was spending too much money on their classes and which departments were underspending. And then I could do some work with them in collaboration to even out the money situation. So there are things you can do, and don't assume you can do everything. I'm crappy in math. I can balance my checkbook. I now can balance a $6 million budget. But, I'm not going to do high calculus. And so know what your competencies are and stay within the realm of what you can do and let others do those things that you cannot do. Now, the other thing that I've learned as a leader, and I think this is probably one of the hardest things for a leader to do, is to be open to other people's viewpoints and differences. You know, when you come in as a leader, you kind of want to go, oh, I'm in charge. I know what I'm doing. Well, none of us totally know what we're doing. You know, I mean, I'm watching Obama, and he had his troubles. He still has his troubles. He's doing the best he can under these circumstances, but he's not getting everything done. And so, too, when you are in a leadership position, you have all of these idealistic goals about what it is that you want to accomplish, and then you can't because of the political situation, because of the economic situation, because of personalities. And so what I have learned is to be open to differences, other people's perspectives, because what you find out is that you don't know all the answers, but oftentimes other people know the answers. And if you listen to them, and maybe you have it, we used to have this table. We would sit around when I was dean. There were like 16 departments. And all the chairs of the departments would sit around the table, and I would be there, and I'd throw out a dilemma. Okay, we have to cut $1 million out of $6 million budget by the next semester. That was one of my semester's tasks. And we figured it out. But we figured it out by everybody throwing in ideas. And they went back to their departments, and they threw in ideas. And so it was a cumulative, cooperative process. And so don't be an authoritarian. If you think you have the answer, let me tell you, somebody else has a better answer. And so you need to give people a chance to come up with and then they buy in. The funny thing about cutting that $1 million out of the $6 million budget was that I ended up making the final decisions. They had given me all the ideas, and I implemented many of them, but I didn't implement all of them. But they all felt like they had buy-in on this question of how do you cut the budget, because I'd listened to them, even if I didn't take all of their advice. And then sometimes people would come to me and they'd say, you have to do X, Y, and Z. And I think, how the hell am I going to do that? I don't have the money. I don't have the clout, nor do I have the authority to do any of that. But I would listen hard, right, and say, I'm going to do the best I can. And sometimes it would take years. I remember we had a geography lab over in Stevenson that was from the 19th century. I mean, it had maps that people rolled up. Didn't have any technology, didn't have GIS or GPS or any of the fancy equipment. And this new faculty member came to me and said, look, I trained at the best universities in the country, and now I'm going back to the 19th century. Can you help me? Well, I had no money. We had no resources. But 6 years later, we were able to work it out. We saved money a little bit. We got IT to buy in to help with him, and 6 years later, and he was patient, he got the latest laboratory equipment. And that was because we worked cooperatively. I listened to what he needed. I worked with other people on campus. I knew people in landscapes and IT and people in HR and people in advising, because it's a community. And you need to know your community in order to pull strings. You know, there's a line that I like to say, I am a gorilla in the bureaucracy, not a G-O-R-R-I-L-L-A, right. Not that kind of gorilla, G-U-E-R-I-L-L-A. In other words, I like to subvert, come into the bureaucracy and kind of make it work for people. Not blow it up, because you can't blow up a university. You don't want to blow up the institution, but you could fix it and tinker with it a little bit. And if you are respected and liked in any bureaucracy you work in, you can be a gorilla in the bureaucracy. There was a book written about it, and I studied it in grad school, and I thought, that's what I'm going to be, a gorilla in the bureaucracy. So I think parts of the skills that I really urge you to gather, if you've not done so yet, is to listen. Listen, listen, listen. Nature detests a vacuum. So if you sit quietly and shut up, just shut up and listen, somebody's going to have something smart to say. I notice that in classes. You're going to see I'm going to ask you to ask questions, and I'm just going to sit here. And eventually, somebody speaks up because nature doesn't like a vacuum. And so listen to other people, and they will tell you what you need to know. You need to be civil. You don't call people names. You don't insult them. You don't call them into question for their skills or abilities, even if they're crappy abilities. You build up on what they do know, right? You don't say, hey, you're a lousy teacher. You might say to them, you're really good at leading group discussions. Lectures, maybe, more discussions, and rather than and less lectures. That's what I would do when I was evaluating faculty members, because I wasn't going to say, oh, you're a crappy lecturer. I said instead, you lead good discussions, so maybe that's the best way for your classroom. So practice listening skills, build coalitions with all kinds of people, develop interpersonal skills, and have effective civil discourse, civil discussions, so that you don't raise your voice, you don't get argumentative. I had one chair of a department who argued with me every time he came to the room. I used to dread his showing up. I knew what this was going to be. He was going to badmouth the administration. He was going to badmouth the budget. And then when I would come up with, find some solutions, no solutions. Eventually, you know what I did? I moved into the department and negotiated with them to change the chair and get somebody else in the position. I didn't tell him you're a crappy chair, right? I couldn't do that. But I went to others in the department quietly and said, it's time for a change. Let's talk about who could step up and take on this role next. And it worked beautifully. So there are ways of negotiating without having to be combative or confrontative. I think to be a leader is a cross between your head, your heart, and practice. You use your head, logical thinking. You use your heart to be empathic. And then you practice it over and over and over again so that you get better and better and better at it. Now, obviously, you in this room have leadership skills. You have the abilities to become someone great. You probably already are, but even greater. When I was in college, I didn't know who or what I was. By the time I was out of my PhD program, I kind of knew that I was going to be a professor and that was my identity. So you are an emerging leader now, and you've got to find those things that you do best and own them. If you're crappy at art, you're not going to be an art teacher. But maybe you're a fabulous musician. Or maybe you have great listening skills. Maybe you could be a therapist with your listening skills. Maybe you could be a music teacher or a musician with your music skills. So at this stage of life, you're honing who you are, trying to figure it out. And then, this other piece of advice that I have, students always come to me in their senior year and go, I don't know what I'm going to do now. What the hell do I do? I'm graduating. And I always suggest this. Apply for jobs, apply for graduate schools, apply to the Peace Corps. Just apply, apply, apply. Throw the net widely out to anything that looks right for you. Then you pull the net in. What's in that net? I remember when I graduated college, I applied for the Peace Corps. I got the Philippines, and there was a dictator in place. I didn't want to go there. I didn't get the job I applied for, and I got into graduate school. Okay, the universe decided for me it was graduate school time. So what you've got to do is cast out the net, bring it in, and see what's in that net for you that are all in keeping with and congruent with who you are as a person. I mean, I was not going to apply to become a deep sea diver. Those were not my skills. So whatever's right for you. And a point that I think has been underemphasized in leadership is about being ethical. We have many leaders nowadays who are not ethical, who have the rhetoric but don't live their ethics. And so what you do with your ethics is you're a role model. And so people have to say, you have to know your values. You have to know what you believe in. And you have to know your heart and who you are deep inside. And then you do not cheat, you do not lie, and you do not manipulate. Right? You do not cheat, lie, or manipulate, because you have to be honest and clear. With that chair that I moved out of the position, I was honest. I said, you know, I don't think you and I really see eye to eye on how to run your department, and we're clashing a great deal. So maybe there's a better solution to that. And eventually he said, you know, I don't want to be chair anyway. And I thought, phew, thank goodness, because I don't want you either. And he moved on, and we moved somebody else into that position. So I was not manipulative, I was clear. So, you know, ethics nowadays, ethics are so, people kind of think they're malleable, that they're, you know, shady, that you can change what you think and what you believe in and how you act. You got to have a rudder. You have to have a deep rudder that says, I will do this and I won't do this. You know, I'm not going to lie, cheat, or steal, or manipulate with people. I'm going to be a very congruent, ethical, and moral human being. And I can't urge that enough, because as I've seen, you know, I'm now 72 years old. That's pretty damn old. And it kind of shocks me to see how ethics and morals have really, I would say, not decayed, because I know students like you who are wonderful human beings, but there are people out there who are kind of shady and doing unethical things. And don't be one of them, all right? Please, don't be one of them. What I would like to also suggest is to be very purposeful. Know what you're doing, right? And don't commit random acts. I mean, you know that bumper sticker, commit random acts of kindness? It's an old bumper sticker. That's very nice, you know, pay it forward for somebody who's going through the toll booth, for someone who's behind you, or, well, you can't do it anymore with Fast Track, but you used to be able to do that. Or, you know, at Starbucks buying a cup of coffee for someone. That's random acts of kindness, and that's lovely. But you really, in your leadership, have to be, think through what you want and how to get there. Have a goal and know what your path is. Now, it might be that that path doesn't work, and you have to take another path. Or maybe you have to listen to somebody else and try yet a third path. But be purposeful. And I say this with having had a lot of bad experiences. I used to shoot from the hip. You know, I used to say, oh, I'm from New York. I'm honest. I'm hurtful. I'm not just honest. I can be really hurtful. And I didn't realize it. You know, in New York, we say it like it is. And so what I realized is that I had to really hold my tongue and learn how to be a nicer person and be purposeful in what my goals were, without just saying, hey, we're going to do this, and I know it's the best, and what's wrong with you anyway? Why don't you get it? I mean, that would be my inclination to say that to people. But you can't, because then, one, they're not going to get behind you and help you do what you're trying to do. Two, they're going to hate you, and three, you're going to feel crappy. It just doesn't work that way. So really be purposeful and be kind and ethical while you're thinking through what you want and how to get there. And then the other thing that I had the experience with, and this has been the hardest, people come to you as a leader asking you all the time for something, right? When I was dean, they wanted money to travel, they wanted more classes, they wanted all kinds of goodies that I couldn't give them. And what you learn to do is to say no, nicely. say no nicely. You might say, yes, I'm going to try, and then see if you can do it, but then come back and don't lie. Yeah, I'm going to do it, and then don't, because then they're not going to trust you, right? So say you're going to try, but if not, come back and say, hey, look, I just can't do that. I really made my best effort. Maybe we'll go for it next year. Like I said to that geography professor, we're going to get this done. But it was a slow slog, step by step, to make it happen. But he saw that I was working with him, and it happened. But let me suggest that even the best leaders screw up. And I made some bloopers along the way, embarrassing bloopers, but I had some really great failures. I had some great, I'll end my talk on what I was able to accomplish, but let me tell you about some of my failures so you won't feel so bad when you screw up, all right? Because, well, we're all going to screw up. One, I made some terrible hiring decisions. I was the person, the faculty departments would choose their best candidates when they were hiring for a tenure position. Then they would bring them to me, their best candidates, and then I would be given a pool of 3. And I would ask them who was their first choice. Well, when I first got here, I didn't want to make people mad, so I hired their first choice. Mistake. Because they were hiring for an Ivy League Research One university. And we are a state college, state university. We don't have the resources, but I hired who they wanted rather than the one I knew who would stay here. Because there are some people who like to be teachers, and there are other people who want to be researchers. But we, when I first started, hired the researchers. They lasted 2 years, and they left. And then we had to hire again, if we could. But what I found is that if I voiced that to the faculty, I really think that X is quite a star. I don't think he's going to stay here because he's got Ivy League in his eyes and he wants to publish all these books and he needs research monies. What about going with Y? He's a stable guy, he's got a family, he wants to come here, he's been at universities like this. This is a keeper. Eventually, they listened to me, and those faculty members are still here, where the other ones have been long gone. So I made some screw-up mistakes about hiring. The other thing that I did was I didn't listen to others. I thought I knew better at the beginning, kind of a hot shot. And I screwed up, and the president told me I screwed up, and the provost told me I screwed up. They cut me a break, and what happened was that I trusted my scheduler my first semester here. Dean set the schedule for all of you, what rooms, what times, how many people, and I was trusting someone, and I trusted her, and she screwed up completely. And I didn't listen to others about her, and she was out to sabotage me. And the president came to me and he said, "She screwed up on you. What's wrong with you?" And I hadn't listened. I hadn't listened to anybody because I was trusting her. So listen for the advice. And I acted hastily. There were times when I just wanted to get something done, and so I did it. And when I looked back later, I realized I hadn't gone through the proper channels. I hadn't done the right due diligence to learn something, to see how to do it. So I screwed up badly. Now, let's see. We have, 10 more minutes? What time? What time do we have till?
6 minutes.
6 minutes. Oh, God. All right. Let me do my greatest hits and then questions. All right, so build a team. Oh, yeah. Let me start with some of the best things that I did. Mentoring others. I love to watch people grow, and so I would hire young faculty members, and now they're going on and becoming deans and chairs of departments and writing books, and mentoring as a leader is probably one of the best. I collaborated on tons of projects on campus. When you walk back towards campus, if you know the Holocaust and Genocide Memorial Grove, with the Anne Frank tree, that's my baby. I conceptualized it, got the sculptor to design it, raise the money to have it, applied to get the tree, and it's got my name all over it, and that's mine. I started programs here. There's an International Honor Society that I started. There, you know, I could go on and on, but I don't want to toot my own horn. But let me just say that the best thing you can feel about working or being a leader is watching the successes and seeing them come to fruition. And that's the joy of a leadership, is watching things come to fruition, being seen by others as a role model, and being seen as someone who is ethical and has high standards of values. So on that note, I've got maybe 4 minutes, and now you're going to talk to me. So how about some questions, please? And I'm going to sit in silence until somebody asks. Thank you.
What are your 2 masters in?
I have a master's in social work and a master's in public health and community mental health. I never use the community mental health one, but it looks good. You know, I think 1 master's is plenty. I think 2 is redundant. You don't need 2. Don't get 2 bachelors, and 1 bachelor's is plenty, and then a master's, and then if you want more, get more. School's fun.
Why do you think family is so hard to deal with, like,
Why family? Family is hard to deal with?
yeah, like change their perspective and like find their acceptance and stuff?
Oh, I didn't. It's a brilliant question. How do you get your family to accept you? And I would say ultimately just keep doing what you got to do, because you got to stay on your path. And they might not like it, but eventually they'll see that you're good at it. But I'll be honest with you, my parents, as proud of me as they were prouder of my brother, who accomplished less, because I was a girl. So they never quite got it. And to this day, I mean, they're dead now, and I forgive them. But, you know, it was not pretty. It was not pretty at all. Yeah. A little louder, hon. How different would my path been if I joined? Well, you know, what happened was I was always an internationalist. I mean, I went on semester at sea 3 times, circumnavigated the globe. So I think I would have become more international earlier, and maybe not been a professor. Maybe I'd be working in international aid of some sort. But it would still be in the process of helping in some way. But, you know, another piece of advice that I have for you, you know, on CSU has that travel abroad semester. Do it. Do it. Don't miss out. Here's an opportunity with the same amount of money that you spend here to go and experience the world. It changes your life. You know, get a backpack and just go out there. My first trip, I had $1,000 in a backpack, and I went to Europe. And I was with friends. Don't travel alone. It's dangerous. But otherwise, go, because it's a fabulous experience. Do we have a little more time? In the way back. Oh, in the white t-shirt. Could you, I'm a little deaf, as they say, so who's down here? What did he say? Say it one more time and they'll relay.
What are you looking for most when you hire someone for a teaching position?
A PhD. Honestly. Yeah, no, you have to have a PhD at a university to teach. And then good teaching. You know, we watch you when you teach and make sure that you can relate to students and that you have good content, but good interpersonal skills as well. So first get the PhD and work on all the rest of that. So I want to thank you. This was fun, and I'll see you all.